Lieutenant Commander Park Dongwoo felt the familiar vibration beneath his feet as Harmony Station's artificial gravity systems hummed to life. The massive space station floated in the neutral zone between Earth and the Vralian Empire. Its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 3 different suns. His service companion, a small but intelligent creature called Zephyr, pressed gently against his leg to signal another direction change. Zephyr wasn't just any guide animal. The furry creature from Proxima B had been genetically enhanced with telepathic abilities, allowing it to sense obstacles and emotions from great distances. Its 6 legs moved silently across the polished floor, and its large, sensitive ears twitched at every sound. The creature had been Dongwoo's constant companion for 3 years, ever since the doctors told him his blindness was permanent. The war had taken many things from him: his sight, his old life, his dreams of becoming a starship pilot. But it had also given him something unexpected: senses so sharp he could navigate by sound alone, hear conversations 3 rooms away, and feel the emotional vibrations of people around him. The military doctors called it neural compensation, but Dongwoo knew it was something more. Today, those enhanced senses were on full alert. The station buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from 12 different worlds prepared for the First Galactic Cultural Summit. This wasn't just a meeting. It was humanity's chance to prove they belonged among the stars. The main hall stretched out before them like a cathedral made of living light. Crystalline walls shifted color based on the emotions of the people inside, and the ceiling showed a real-time view of the cosmos above. Dongwoo could hear at least 8 different languages being spoken, along with the clicking, humming, and whistling sounds of non-human species near the center of the hall. Something extraordinary dominated the space: the bioharmonic ray of Maestro Kylvonas looked like a tree that had grown from pure music itself. Its trunk was a column of condensed sound crystal, while its branches spread outward in impossible geometric patterns. Each branch ended in a resonance note that glowed with soft, hypnotic light. Dongwoo had read about these instruments in the military briefings. They were living technology, grown rather than built, capable of producing frequencies that could heal minds, induce visions, or even alter the basic structure of matter. Only the most gifted Vralian artists could operate them, and Kylvonas was considered their greatest master. The maestro himself stood nearly 8 feet tall, his elongated form draped in robes that seemed to be woven from starlight, bioluminescent. Patches along his neck and arms pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and his large, dark eyes held the wisdom of someone who had lived for centuries. To the Vralians, he was more than an artist. He was a living bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. Zephyr suddenly stopped, its ears flattening against its head. Dongwoo felt the creature's tension and paused, listening carefully. A maintenance drone had crashed nearby, leaving scattered debris across their path. The drone's emergency beacon was still beeping, creating a chaotic sound pattern that confused his navigation. "Easy, girl," Dongwoo whispered, gently stroking Zephyr's fur. "We'll go round." He took a step to the right, then another. The path seemed clear, but as he moved forward, his shoulder brushed against something that felt like crystal wind chimes, the contact center pure, bell-like tone ringing through the hall. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every conversation stopped. Every being in the hall turned to look at him. Even the background hum of the station systems seemed to pause in shock. Dongwoo realized with growing horror that he had touched one of the maestro's resonance crystals. The delicate instrument was still vibrating from the contact, sending discordant waves through the carefully tuned ray. Clumsy mammal, the voice that erupted from Kylvonas carried such force that it seemed to shake the very walls. The maestro's bioluminescent patches flared bright red with anger, Your primitive species contaminates even the air with your crude vibrations. How dare you touch an instrument your barbaric minds cannot comprehend? The words hit Dongwu like physical blows. Round the hall, various alien species began making sounds that his universal translator couldn't quite process. But their meaning was clear. They were laughing at him. A group of Varalian officials, their robes marking them as cultural ministers, nodded approvingly at their maestro's outburst. Their attitudes seemed to say that this was exactly what they expected from humans: clumsiness, ignorance, disrespect for higher forms of art. Dongwu felt his face burn with shame. He had survived 3 years of brutal space combat, had coordinated the defense of an entire planet while working in complete darkness. But this moment of accidental contact had reduced him to a stumbling fool in front of the galaxies. Most important, cultural figures, security personnel in sleek, form-fitting suits began moving toward him from different directions. Their boots clicked against the crystal floor with military precision, and he could hear the soft whir of stun weapons being quietly activated. Zephyr pressed closer against his leg. Sensing his distress, the little creature's loyalty was absolute, and Dongwu knew it would try to protect him if necessary. But there was nothing either of them could do now except endure the humiliation and hope that the damage to humanity's reputation could somehow be repaired. The laughter continued, echoing off the crystalline walls like a chorus of mockery that seemed to come from the stars themselves. Admiral Kim Hyen-soo gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white with controlled anger. From her elevated position, she had a perfect view of the humiliation unfolding below. The crystalline floor of the main hall reflected the cruel laughter of alien delegates as they watched Park Dong-W, who being escorted away like a common criminal. But Kim knew something these aliens didn't. She had personally reviewed every file on the human delegation, and Park Dong-woo's record was extraordinary. During the siege of New Seoul, when enemy plasma cannons had destroyed the Orbital Defense Command Center, Dongwu had worked for 18 straight hours in complete darkness. Power systems were down, visual displays were destroyed, and communication rays were failing one by one, while other officers panicked. Dongwu had coordinated the entire planetary defense using only sound. He had memorized the audio signatures of every ship in the human fleet, could identify enemy vessels by their engine frequencies, and had directed successful counterattacks by listening to the subtle changes in weapon charging cycles. The man had saved 3 billion lives while working in conditions that would have broken most people. Now, these arrogant aliens were treating him like a fool who had stumbled into their precious zone. Kim watched as the Varalian security forces moved closer to Dongwu. Their anti-gravity boots made no sound, but she could see the energy weapons discreetly attached to their belts. The entire situation was about to become a diplomatic disaster that would set human-alien relations back decades. She couldn't let that happen. Admiral Kim activated her personal communicator, sending a priority message to her aides stationed near the main entrance. Lieutenant Park Ji-won, I need you to delay those security officers. Use any excuse you can think of, but keep them talking for at least 5 minutes. The response came back immediately. Understood. Admiral, what's the plan? Kim was already moving toward the spiral staircase that connected the observation deck to the main floor. I'm going to give our friends a demonstration of what humans are really capable of. As she descended, Kim's enhanced military cybernetics began analyzing the crowd. Her optical implants identified key figures in the alien delegation, measuring their emotional states through micro-expressions and body language. The Varalian cultural ministers were clearly enjoying the spectacle, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with satisfied superiority. But there were others who seemed less certain. A group of Centaurian delegates were whispering among themselves. Their crystalline bodies refracting light in patterns that suggested confusion rather than amusement. The robotic representatives from the Mechanus Collective were simply observing, their sensors recording everything for later analysis. Kim reached the main floor just as the security officers were about to reach Dongwu, her military training kicked in automatically, and she projected her voice with the authority of someone who had commanded starship fleets in battle, Maestro Calvonis. Her words cut through the chatter like a laser beam. Every conversation in the hall stopped as hundreds of beings turned to look at her. Perhaps you'd allow our representative to demonstrate human artistic capabilities. The maestro's elongated form turned slowly in her direction. His bioluminescent patches shifted from red anger to blue curiosity, then settled into a pattern that Kim's military briefings had taught her meant condescending. Amusement, Admiral. Calvonis' voice resonated through the hall with musical precision. Your species produces nothing but noise. Crude vibrations that assault the senses rather than elevate them. But if you wish to further embarrass yourselves, I shall permit this entertainment. Several alien delegates began making sounds that Kim's translator identified as various forms of laughter. The Trilaxian ambassador's tentacles writhed with what appeared to be anticipation of another human failure. Kim ignored them all and walked directly to where Dongwu stood beside his service companion. The blind veteran's face was a mask of controlled emotion, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his dark glasses. The piano from the Earth Cultural Exhibit, she whispered, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. Can you do this for a moment? Dongwu said nothing. Kim could practically hear his thoughts racing, weighing the risks of another public failure against the possibility of redemption. Finally, he nodded slowly. During my recovery, he said quietly, music was the only thing that kept me sane. When the darkness felt like it would swallow me whole, I would play. The melodies I composed helped me remember who I was before the war. Kim felt a surge of respect for the man. She activated her communicator again, this time broadcasting on the command frequency. All Earth personnel, I need the cultural exhibit piano moved to the main hall immediately. Full priority. The response was immediate. Admiral, that instrument is over 300 years old. It's not exactly in performance condition. I don't care if it's held together with prayer and good intentions, Kim replied. Get it here now. While they waited, Kim positioned herself strategically between Dongwu and the Vralian security forces, her military bearing and decorated uniform made it clear that any attempt to remove the human representative would have to go through her first. The alien delegates began murmuring among themselves, clearly confused by this unexpected turn of events. Some seemed annoyed by the delay, while others appeared curious about what the humans were planning. Within minutes, the sound of repulsor engines filled the hall as maintenance crews maneuvered the piano through. The main entrance, the instrument, was indeed ancient by galactic standards, a wooden upright piano from Earth's classical period. Its dark wood was scarred and weathered, showing the effects of centuries of use and multiple interstellar relocations, but as the maintenance crew positioned it near the center of the hall, Kim noticed something that made her smile. Despite its age and battle damage, the piano had been lovingly maintained. Someone had kept its strings in perfect tune, its keys properly balanced, its internal mechanisms clean and functional. This wasn't just an artifact from humanity's past. It was a living piece of their musical heritage, ready to sing again after traveling across the galaxy to this moment. The contrast was striking. Maestro Calvonis' bioharmonic ray towered above the simple wooden instrument like a crystalline cathedral next to a humble chapel. The alien technology pulsed with sophisticated energy patterns, while the human piano sat quietly, waiting for the touch of human hands to bring it to life. Kim looked at Dongwu and saw something new in his expression. The shame and uncertainty were gone, replaced by quiet determination. Whatever happened next, he was ready. The sight before them was like watching a god prepare to battle a child's toy. Maestro Kylvonas' bioharmonic rays stretched toward the ceiling like a living constellation, each crystalline branch pulsing with colors that had no names in human language. The instrument seemed to breathe, its surface rippling with energy patterns that made the air itself shimmer. Next to this marvel of alien technology sat Park Dong-woo's piano, a simple wooden box that looked like it had been rescued from an ancient Earth museum. Its dark surface was scratched and worn, telling stories of countless fingers that had touched its keys over the centuries, compared to the Vralian masterpiece. It looked almost embarrassingly primitive. Maestro Kylvonas raised his elongated arms, and the bioharmonic ray responded instantly. The first notes didn't just fill the hall, they transformed it. Sound became visible, cascading through the air like liquid starlight. Each frequency was perfectly calculated, designed to trigger specific responses in the brains of every species present. The alien audience began to sway in perfect synchronization, their movements controlled by the mathematical precision of the music. Vralian delegates closed their eyes in rapture, their bioluminescent patches pulsing in time with the melody. The Centaurian crystalline beings began to glow brighter, their bodies resonating with the harmonic frequencies. But the human delegation felt something different. Admiral Kim noticed it first, a subtle feeling of being manipulated, as if invisible strings were trying to control her emotions. The music was undeniably beautiful, but it felt artificial, like a drug that forced happiness rather than inspiring. It naturally. Lieutenant Commander Choi Yun-ji, the cultural attaché, leaned toward Kim and whispered, "It's like listening to a computer try to replicate feelings it's never actually experienced." The performance continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Kylvonas' movements became more elaborate, his arms weaving through the air as he conducted forces that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The crystalline branches of his instrument began to spin, creating geometric patterns that hypnotized the alien audience. Sound waves became visible streams of light, flowing through the hall like rivers of pure energy. The station's walls themselves began to resonate, turning the entire structure into a massive amplifier. Several alien delegates appeared to be having transcendental experiences, their bodies trembling with involuntary pleasure. When the piece finally concluded, the silence that followed was absolute. The alien audience remained frozen for several seconds, as if awakening from a shared dream. Then the applause began, not the chaotic clapping of human appreciation, but a synchronized rhythm that seemed to emerge from the music itself. Kylvonas lowered his arms slowly, his bioluminescent patches now glowing with satisfied superiority. The maestro's dark eyes fixed on Park Dong-woo with unmistakable contempt. Now, primitive, his voice carried easily through the hall's perfect acoustics. "Show us what passes for autumn on your kind." The insult hit like a physical blow. Several alien delegates made sounds that the universal translators couldn't quite process, but their meaning was clear. They were anticipating another humiliation. Park Dong-woo felt every eye in the hall focused on him as he approached the piano. Zephyr, his service companion, pressed against his leg reassuringly, but even the loyal creature seemed nervous in the face of so much hostile attention. His fingers found the piano bench. Then the keyboard. The keys felt familiar under his touch. Cool, smooth, perfectly balanced despite their age. This instrument had been crafted by human hands for human hearts, and it welcomed him like an old friend. The hall was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. Behind him, he sensed the skeptical stares of hundreds of beings who had just witnessed what they believed was the pinnacle of musical achievement. How could a blind human with a primitive wooden box possibly compete with such technological marvel? But as Dongwu placed his hands on the keys, something unexpected happened. The station's hull began to vibrate, not with the artificial frequencies of the bioharmonic ray, but with something deeper, more fundamental. It was as if the metal itself was responding to the potential energy contained within the simple piano. Dongwu closed his eyes behind his dark glasses, though it made no difference to his vision. He could feel the resonance building on him, the way the station's structure seemed to lean in, waiting for the first note. "This piece," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics, "is called Souls Last Night." The title meant nothing to the alien audience. But Admiral Kim felt her breath catch. She knew that name from the military records. Souls Last Night was the final evening before the Great Siege began, when 3 billion people had gone to sleep not knowing if they would wake up to see their home planet destroyed. Park Dongwu's fingers hovered over the keys for one more moment. In that silence, he could hear everything. The subtle hum of the station's life support systems, the nervous breathing of the human delegation, the confident whispers of alien officials who expected him to fail. But he could also hear something else. The station itself seemed to be holding its breath, as if even the artificial intelligence that controlled its systems was curious about what would happen next. The first note, when it came, was so simple it almost seemed anticlimactic. A single key, pressed with perfect timing, sending a pure tone through the hall that seemed to wake something that had been sleeping in the metal walls around them. The first notes that emerged from the old piano were heartbreakingly simple. Park Dongwu's fingers moved across the keys with the gentle touch of someone who had found solace in darkness. Each note clear and pure, the melody spoke of things every being could understand. The warmth of home, the sound of rain falling on familiar streets, the bittersweet moments when loved ones say goodbye, not knowing if they'll meet again. But as the music continued, something impossible began to happen. The station around them started to respond in ways that defied every law of physics the aliens thought they understood. The titanium steel hull, designed to withstand the crushing vacuum of space and the violent energies of interstellar travel, began to vibrate in perfect harmony with the piano's frequencies. Admiral Kim felt it first, a subtle tremor that seemed to come from the very bones of the station. The crystalline walls that had been designed to remain perfectly stable began to resonate, amplifying the simple piano notes and sending them flowing through every corridor, every room, every molecule of air in the massive structure. The alien delegates looked round in confusion as their translation devices began registering sounds that weren't coming from the piano itself. The station was singing. Every bolt, every panel, every support beam had become part of a vast musical instrument, turning the entire facility into a resonance chamber, unlike anything in galactic history. Dongwu seemed unaware of the mechanical miracle happening round him. His focus was entirely on the keys, on the melody that poured from his heart through his fingertips. The music shifted, becoming something darker and more intense. He was playing memories now, not just his own, but the collective experience of his entire species. He played the moment when the enemy fleet had first appeared in Earth's solar system, their ships blotting out the stars like a plague of mechanical locusts. The notes grew harsh and discordant, reflecting the terror that had gripped humanity when they realized they were facing an enemy with technology far beyond their understanding. The alien audience began to shift uncomfortably. They had expected primitive human noise. But this was something different. The music was telling a story. painting pictures in their minds of events they had never witnessed but could somehow feel as if they had lived through them themselves. Dongwu's fingers found the keys that represented the siege of New Seoul. The melody became a battle cry, filled with the desperation of 3 billion people who refused to surrender even when death seemed certain. He played the sounds of plasma cannons tearing through the night sky, of brave pilots launching their fighters knowing they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1 in the audience. The Varalian bioluminescent patches began to flicker erratically. These beings had lived for centuries in carefully controlled environments, their emotions regulated by technology and social conditioning. But the raw human music was breaking through their defenses, forcing them to feel things they had forgotten how to experience. The robotic representatives from the Pianist collective began emitting strange electronic sounds. As their processors struggled to analyze what they were hearing, their advanced artificial intelligence systems had been designed to understand and categorize every form of communication in the galaxy. But this music contained elements that didn't fit any of their programmed parameters. Dong-Wu single quotes s. Playing became more personal, more intimate. He was remembering his squad leader, Sergeant Lee Min-ho, a man who had been like a father to him during the darkest days of the war. The melody softened, becoming a lullaby that Min-ho used to hum during the long nights when they waited for enemy attacks. Then came the moment that had changed everything. The plasma blast that had destroyed the command center. The explosion that had taken his sight but somehow spared his life. Dongwu played the exact sequence of events, the warning shouts, the desperate dive for cover. The moment when Min-ho had thrown himself between Dongwu and the searing energy that would have vaporized them both. The music captured not just the physical impact of the blast, but the emotional devastation that followed. The guilt of surviving when others hadn't, the crushing darkness that seemed to swallow everything he had ever known or loved. Several alien delegates found themselves weeping, though they couldn't understand why. But then the melody began to change again, slowly. Like dawn breaking after the longest night, hope began to creep into the music. It was the hope that had sustained humanity through their darkest hour, the belief that even the smallest light could push back the greatest darkness. Dongwu played the moment when the tide of battle had turned, when human ingenuity and determination have found a way to overcome impossible odds. He played the joy of victory, but also the profound sadness of loss, the knowledge that their triumph had come at a terrible price. The station's hull was now vibrating so intensely that some of the alien delegates worried it might tear itself apart. But the structure held, as if it had been designed for this moment, as if every rivet and weld had been waiting for the chance to sing this song. The Centaurian crystalline beings began to glow with colors that had never been seen before, their bodies reacting to frequencies that seemed to bypass their conscious minds and speak directly to their souls. The Trilaxian ambassador's tentacles writhed not with amusement now, but with something that might have been awe. Even Maestro Kyle Vonus stood transfixed, his bioluminescent patches shifting through colors that had no names in his language. The great musician was experiencing something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of art and music. The melody reached its crescendo, and with it came the final revelation. This wasn't just music. It was the distilled essence of what it meant to be human, to face impossible odds with nothing but courage and hope, to find beauty in the darkest places and refuse to let that beauty die. When the last note faded into silence, something extraordinary happened. The station's hull continued to vibrate for several seconds, as if the metal itself was reluctant to let the music die. Then, gradually, the resonance faded, leaving behind a silence so complete it seemed to press against everyone's eardrums. Park Dong-woo sat motionless at the piano, His hands still resting on the keys, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the station's climate control, and his breathing was deep and measured like a runner who had just completed a marathon. Zephyr pressed against his leg, sensing the emotional exhaustion that came from pouring one's soul into music. The alien delegates remained frozen, as if they had witnessed something that their minds were still trying to process. The Vralian bioluminescent patches continued to flicker in patterns that had no precedent in their cultural databases. The Centaurian crystalline beings still glowed with those impossible new colors, their bodies struggling to return to their normal transparent state. For a full minute, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the station's life support systems and the soft breathing of hundreds of beings who had just experienced something that would change them forever. Then, slowly, Maestro Kyle Vonus began to walk toward the piano. Each step was deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if he were approaching a sacred altar. The maestro's usual commanding presence had vanished, replaced by something that Admiral Kim had never seen in an alien before: genuine humility. The towering Vralian stopped just a few feet from the piano bench. Up close, Dongwu could hear the subtle electronic hum of the maestro's bioimplants, the soft whisper of his breathing, the slight tremor in his voice when he finally spoke. "In for centuries of existence," Kyle Vonus whispered, his words carrying easily through the hall's perfect acoustics, "I have never heard music that could touch the quantum consciousness itself." The admission sent shockwaves through the alien delegation. Several Vralian cultural ministers began making urgent clicking sounds, their bio-patches flashing in what Kim recognized as extreme agitation. For their greatest maestro to admit superiority in a human was unprecedented. But Calvinus continued, his voice growing stronger as he struggled to find words for concepts his species had forgotten. "Your instrument is primitive by our standards. Your technique, while skilled, contains imperfections that our bioharmonics would automatically correct. Yet," he paused, his elongated hands trembling slightly, "yet it speaks truths that our perfect harmonies cannot reach." The hall erupted in a cacophony of alien voices. Translation devices struggled to keep up with the flood of different languages, creating a babble of confusion that echoed off the crystalline walls. Some delegates seemed outraged by the maestro's words, while others appeared to be defending his right to speak them. Lieutenant Commander Cho Yun-ji, who had been standing with the human delegation, stepped forward. The cultural attaché had spent years studying alien psychology, and she recognized this moment as a crucial turning point in interspecies relations. "Maestro," she said, her voice calm and respectful, "music isn't about technical perfection. It's about connection, soul to soul, heart to heart. That's what humans understand that your bioharmonics cannot replicate." Her words seemed to unlock something in the alien audience. The robotic representatives from the Mechanist Collective began transmitting rapid data bursts to their home world, their processors finally able to categorize what they had experienced. The Trilaxian ambassador's tentacles moved in patterns that indicated deep contemplation, while the Centaurian delegates continued to glow with those strange new colors. In the following hours, the station's communication rays lit up with messages flying across the galaxy. The Vralian Empire's delegation huddled in urgent discussion, their century-old assumptions about human capabilities crumbling in the face of what they had witnessed. By the next morning, 3 more species had formally requested cultural exchanges. With Earth, the Andromedans, who had remained neutral in galactic politics for over 1,000 years, sent a delegation specifically to meet with Park Dongwu. The Silicon Lords, beings of pure energy who rarely interacted with biological species, requested copies of his composition for analysis. The Galactic Council which had been preparing to classify humans as a limited capability species suitable only for basic labor and resource extraction, held an emergency session. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be granted full membership in the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entail. Park Dong-woo found himself at the center of a diplomatic revolution. Within weeks, he was appointed as Earth's first interspecies cultural ambassador, a position that had never existed because no species had ever demonstrated the ability to truly communicate across the vast differences that separated galactic civilizations. His composition, Soul's Last Night, became legendary throughout the galaxy. It was studied by alien musicologists, analyzed by quantum physicists, and performed by artists from dozens of different worlds. Each species interpreted it through their own cultural lens, but all recognized its fundamental truth, that consciousness, in all its forms, shared common threads that could be woven together through art. Years later, Park Dong-woo stood in the music halls of New Geneva Station, Earth's newest diplomatic outpost. Round him, human and alien students worked together, exploring the boundaries between their different forms of artistic expression. A young alien was learning to play the piano while a human teenager experimented with bioharmonic frequencies. Zephyr, now older and grayer but still loyal, dozed peacefully in the corner. The little creature had become something of a celebrity herself, featured in documentaries about the historic performance that had changed the galaxy. As Dong-woo listened to his students practice, he often smiled at the irony of his situation. The wall that had taken his sight had also given him the darkness necessary to find the light that connected all living beings. The explosion that had ended his dreams of becoming a starship pilot had instead made him a bridge between worlds. The melody of defiance that had begun in the ruins of Seoul had become the symphony of unity that now played throughout the galaxy. And in the music halls of New Geneva Station, where beings from across the cosmos gathered to learn from each other, that symphony continued to grow, one note at a time. The blind veteran who had once stumbled in the darkness now helped light the way for an entire galaxy learning to see itself in a new light. The END.